Quick, pop quiz.
What color is my underwear?
Nah, that's the wrong one. Oh yeah, it's this one. Which colors does the mast of this ship have? Don't cheat, just the first color that comes into your mind. Pause the video, write it down, or just leave a comment. I'm gonna say it now. You ready? It's blue. Or it has a bluish hue, to be precise. When I asked this very same question on stream, a couple of you guys actually guessed correctly. Bottom line, color is a fascinating topic. And what we are going to do today is to ease you into the topic of how all of this works, aka color theory. I'll be showing you the basics of how color works, what you need to know for starters, and all of this should hopefully help you when using color on not only backgrounds, but also humans, comics, anime, and manga, etc. By the way, in case you didn't really do well at the quiz earlier, here's your chance to redeem yourself. Who do you think sponsors today's video? You might be surprised. Is it Raid Shadow Legends? Is it Skillshare? Is it all of the above? Or is it me? I'm today's sponsor. I know not everyone follows my social media, which is why I decided to refuse all of the sponsorship offers I got and to use the opportunity to tell you this way. I've spent a whole year up until now to paint 12 of the most difficult artworks I've ever made in my life. I've taught myself a whole new medium in order to paint these. And I did so in order to make the best combination of art book and poster that you could have. That's right, a calendar. I'm a big fan of physical calendars personally, because I always get sick of the same posters after like a month. So yeah, instead of making these artworks posters, I've made a whole calendar out of them. And it's now available in my online shop together with a making of magazine on how I approached every single one of these drawings and how I've drawn them. You know, in case you want to see the whole making of process as well. The making of magazine also goes into detail on how I've made every single one of these and explains how I approach them. The magazine is available as long as the calendar is still in stock. I'm not even exaggerating when I say that these have to be some of the best artworks that I have ever made. Some even took me several weeks to get finished. And obviously it's a calendar, so it's not going to be around forever. So if you want to have this calendar, you still have time until late December to finally get this one. Thank you guys all so much for the support. I really appreciate it. Be it by ordering something in my online shop or just the usual support, like thumbing up this video. Now, I guess you guys want to paint like this as well someday. So in that case, it's time to finally learn color theory. Like a sir. Let's start with the very basics. You need to know about three basic things. These are value, saturation, and yeah, that's probably how you pronounce that. Hue is, in layman's terms, the color you're using. Red, green, blue, these are all hues. So this refers only to the pure color, not talking about brightness or anything. And speaking of which, value is another word for brightness, meaning how bright or dark your color is. Also, pretty self-explanatory if you ask me. Now, where things are getting more interesting though is when it comes to saturation. Saturation basically means how intense your color is. A lot of saturation means it's really intense. Low saturation means you're basically coloring in grayscales. And now this is where especially digital artists make the mistake of thinking, yeah, of course I want to have the most intense colors. I'm using the most intense red, the most intense green, the most intense blue colors I could have. But in reality, no professional out there colors like this. Because that's how, instead of these artworks, you oftentimes get results like these instead. So knowing how to choose a color can literally make or break an artwork. And that's precisely why you are watching this video right now. Because you now just understood the most important things about color. There are different hues like green, red, blue, and so on. How color can be more or less intense, and it can be darker or brighter. So basically you understood how color works within just a couple of minutes. A lot of people are confused or even overwhelmed by the sight of color wheels or the color selector in their app. But you now at least know how to read and understand this correctly. And now that you kinda understand how this works, let's ease you into this topic with some nice ways to use colors in your art. Let's talk about color harmony first, because before beginning to paint your artwork, it's always helpful to think what kind of colors you could use before you start painting. And this color wheel from before is an extreme help here. It could answer the question of what mood should my artwork have. Here's a very easy example for starters: monochromatic colors. This is a fancy word for saying I'm just using one color. These artworks of mine are a bit older, but they are still a very good example in this place. So I've drawn this artwork with only one hue, but the color itself can obviously get a bit brighter or darker or more and less saturated. As long as the hue doesn't change, it's still monochromatic. And here is also an example with blue as a hue. Again, parts of this artwork get darker or lighter, but the hue never changes. The next trickier one is having analogous colors. Analogous colors basically means the hues that you're picking for your artwork should be right next to one another. This is a pretty common color scheme that you can see in a lot of artworks, because it's pretty easy to make an artwork with just a couple of similar looking colors. But just look at it. It always looks so harmonic and soothing. And no, before you ask, it doesn't have to do anything with anal. And no, it also doesn't have to do anything with Among Us. This works in the complete opposite way as well, by the way. You could also start painting with contrasts. The most common one is obviously complementary contrast. This basically just means that you have to pick two hues in the color wheel that are on the opposite side of one another. Now, as an example, just imagine how boring this artwork of Hades would look if I also gave him a green outfit along with his green hair and green fire. Complementary contrast can be tricky because there's always the risk of your artwork looking like a birthday card made by an 8-year-old. But if you're planning this correctly, this could improve your art by a landslide. Of course, there are a lot of different color schemes, but the last one that I'm showing you before we actually apply this stuff is a triad color scheme. You might have guessed it from the name, but this means you're using colors that align in a perfect triangle in this color wheel. Now, this would be an easy example. In this artwork, I just took the easy way out of using one color in the foreground and just throwing the other colors in the background. But now just imagine how boring and monotonous this artwork would look if, for example, you wouldn't have the orange part in this artwork. Kinda feels like there's something missing. Now, I've got to admit, I've basically never tried painting a triad before because there was always something missing, because it can be really tricky to use exactly these colors. For example, in this artwork I was almost able to get a nice triad scheme, but these trees are green, so if I replaced them with something yellow, I would have had a nice triad color scheme. I also kinda tried this with the March artwork that I've painted for my calendar. This is also almost a triad. I don't know if this counts, by the way, but I just couldn't help myself. I had to use purple shadows in the foreground. So yeah, even though it isn't as prominent, it still doesn't really count, I assume. Also, by the way, before I forget it, you can also apply this to character designs. Arizona, for example, has a warm, analogous color scheme, which has a very harmonic vibe. Pep, on the other hand, is more based on a complementary contrast, just in order to highlight the golden horn on his beak. Just try looking out for this when looking at artworks or character designs from other artists. You will be amazed how many artists make use of this kind of knowledge. Now, those were the things that happen prior to painting when you need some ideas or some planning, but let's get more practical now. The most important thing is that you understood how these three elements of making a color work. Now, the first thing that's so fascinating to me is color context. Here's a simple example. Both of these images contain the very same color, but on the left, the red stands out a lot more than on the right. On the right example, you almost have to focus in order to distinguish the red color from the background. And one instance where all of you experienced this phenomenon before is with skin coloration. Coloring the skin first always makes it look so damn dark, which makes sense considering the white background is such a harsh contrast. And I don't think I have to spell it out for you at this point, you get it, right? But if you color everything in, well, then the skin looks almost pale in comparison. And this phenomenon of color context is absolutely crucial when it comes to painting full artworks with backgrounds. Here's the artwork from before. If I'm painting the trees in the back, these trees are getting more and more bluish. I'm also very sure you have seen this phenomenon before, be it photography, movies or video games. This is very basic knowledge a lot of artists apply. This phenomenon is called aerial perspective, and in case you wonder why it's called that, well then happy reading. Yeah, I don't really know that myself, so if you care, just read into it. So yeah, your aerial perspective obviously depends on the color context, on your background, so you can't just change your mind on the background midway, like, oh yeah, actually I kinda wanted to have this artwork play late at noon though. Yeah, that's not gonna really work out like this. And before you ask, this can also be applied to characters as well. Just like the trees from before changed according to the environment, to the color context, so can your characters. A green environment would obviously also have an effect on the character. So artworks that incorporate these kind of techniques always look so much more lively. Small things like these can sometimes make all the difference. That's because this way it always feels like these characters are actually blending into the environment. Without this effect, they would also just kind of stick out. And I think you know where this is going, right? Okay, so now let's try this out together with these trees as an easy example. The more these trees are in the background, the more the hue shifts towards blue. It's not becoming blue, it's just shifting towards it. So, for example, the brown part of this tree would not just suddenly become blue, it would just shift slightly towards it. So it would be a bit more greenish. Also, it would be less saturated and a bit lighter. And you could also reverse engineer this, because by that logic, the more things are in the foreground, they can have their actual hue, they can be more saturated, and they also don't have to be light anymore, you can go a bit darker. And yeah, you don't have to apply this knowledge, but if you can apply it, it can make for some really nice effects and some more impressive landscapes. And now that brings us to the example from earlier, to my Sea of Thieves fan art with all the blue hues in it. Just look at this artwork without its background and it looks so uncomfortably blue. But with a background, the artwork almost perfectly blends into it. Color context really is the most vital element here. So yeah, if you're painting digitally, you can adjust all of these colors in your handy color wheel. If you're painting traditionally, you also have to mix these colors accordingly. Don't worry, I've made a video for all of you traditional artists out there. I have a segment about mixing colors. I think this could help you out if you have any trouble here. And yeah, I'm afraid you really have to do all of this, because if you don't, you know what, I'll just show you. I'll paint a regular palm tree with regular colors, without any aerial perspective or bluish hues. And yeah, maybe the colors on this tree might look a bit nicer, but just look at how hard this one sticks out. It's almost like this tree doesn't belong here, it really doesn't blend into the bigger picture. And that's what you should aim for here, painting a bigger picture that looks good when you look at it as a whole. Now, as a comparison, there's also a palm tree in the foreground, and this one has its original hue, not bluish, it's a lot darker and has some more saturation. So this also works in the reverse way as well. Now, since all of this was a lot, I went the extra mile and took the time out of my day to make you guys a cheat sheet with the most basic information we discussed. Now, what could a screenshot cost? Well, you decide. You can pay via a like or a comment as an exchange for one screenshot of this cheat sheet I made. And all of this is just the tip of the iceberg. I also have some other videos about color that I would really want to make, but sadly, videos about coloring are always the worst performing ones on my channel. So I would be really happy if you push this video as much as possible, so that more people get the chance to see it. Other than that, I also have some more videos about coloring in my playlist. Just check them out. The video about coloring character designs is especially cool in my opinion. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.